I'd like to call our May 25th, 2022 PSTA Board meeting to order. Commissioner Saraki, would you honor us by leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Madam Chair, I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And now let's go around the room here to introduce ourselves. And Secretary Treasurer Saraki, would you like to start, please?
Yes. Mayor Dan Saraki from the city of Oldsmar.
Vince Cox, Pinellas County.
Jeff Gow, City of Dunedin Commissioner.
Patty Reed, Councilwoman for City of Pinellas Park.
Jim Oliver, Vice Mayor, City of Seminole.
Karen Seal, Pinellas County.
Deborah Fig Sanders, City of St. Petersburg City Council.
Jamie Robinson, Commissioner, City of Largo.
Richard Bennett, Commissioner, North Reddington Beach.
And I'm Brad Miller with PSTA.
And Gina Driscoll again.
And I'm Nikki Day with Bryant Miller Olive, Acting General Counsel.
All right, thank you, and good morning, everyone. We'll start off with a presentation regarding Pride and our Juneteenth events. PSTA Marketing Manager Amanda Baird will present how PSTA will celebrate and participate in these community events next month. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much. My name's Amanda Baird. I am Marketing Manager serving under Whitney Fox, who you've met many times. I am pleased to invite you to a number of celebrations in support of PSTA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion mission in the month of June. June is a wonderful month to celebrate diversity for multiple communities in Pinellas County. First, you have both of these in front of you. We have a number of events celebrating Juneteenth for the first time as a federal holiday. At these events, we will be debuting our winner of our Driving Diversity Artist Contest. We held back in February. That bus is being wrapped as we speak. And that bus will be on tour at these three events. At the June 18th event in the city of Dunedin, we actually invite you to come and meet the artist himself. A little bit about our design, which you'll see here on the screen, and the artist. This is the winning design. Our artist is named Donovan Brutus. He is a Haitian, Black, African-American professional animator and illustrator who has worked in the entertainment, education, and marketing fields for over 14 years. He got his taste for digital art while earning his bachelor's degree in Tampa Bay. The design is titled Routes Revolution 2. It's actually the second piece in a series and was directly inspired by Black Lives Matter, Black Trans Lives Matter, Pride Month, and PSTA's DEI mission statement. So again, we invite you on June 18th to come meet the artist and talk to him a little bit about the design. Second, and no less important, we are once again the official transportation sponsor of St. Pete Pride, which is the largest Pride celebration in the South. Our Pride bus will be on tour at several events throughout the month of June. This one was designed by our very own Justin Foxworth over in the marketing department. You can see here our theme this year is Everyone's Welcome in the Flock, with a little nod to Flamingo Fairs. And we, of course, the bus will be present at all of these events for pictures and as a cooling station. And on the family day, it will actually be a station for nursing parents to feed their babies. And of course, we invite you to march with us in the parade. If you'd like to participate in the parade and you aren't already marching with someone else, we would love to have you. We are ordering wonderful flamingo pink shirts and would love to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Commissioner Fig Sanders.
What was the artist's name again? I'm sorry.
His name is Donovan Brutus.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Peters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I recall a couple months ago, we said we weren't doing full wraps on buses again. And we were gonna, am I mistaken that we said we weren't doing full wraps anymore? We were gonna just do the PSDA and have the windows open?
No,
That is, we are no longer selling full wrap advertisements. We are still using full wraps for PSTA internal promotions.
Oh. Okay, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the look of it, I really do. But when you said that we weren't selling any more full wraps, there was a rationale behind that. And it was really about the PSTA logo, and it was about kind of other things. And so I'm just not sure why we're not being consistent just across the board. Because if you're going to do branding, you have to be consistent. Branding is very important. Consistency is really important. So don't get me wrong, I love it. I think it looks great. It's fun. It's festive. But it seems that every single month we have a full wrap bus. We had the Martin Luther King one. We keep doing the full wrap buses. And I was just thinking, if we're going to branding and we're not selling anything, but yet we're not walking our talk when it comes to that. And so I was just curious, just wanted to bring it up, why we're not being consistent.
well, two things. One, with the PSTA wrap buses, they do have the logo. They do have the, we are able to put the logo on the ones that we wrap ourselves. And second, while we are not having full wrapped paid ads anymore, we still are selling the half a bus wrap,
Right.
which means
Yeah.
that if we sold both halves of the bus, it would still look wrapped. So I mean, the number of windows that are open is increasing, but it's not guaranteed to be wide open.
Okay, it just seems inconsistent. I just want to mention that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Peters. Anyone else have any questions or comments regarding these events? And Commissioner Fig Sanders.
Thank you so much. I would love to join in that conversation, and more importantly, I want to thank our marketing department in regards to Juneteenth and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And sometimes when we do things the same way, you get the same results. And it just says to me that we have taken a focus and made it a priority to want to show the intent of PSTA to make sure that we include each and every one, regardless of what that is. And so for us stepping out of that comfort zone, for us acknowledging some of the things that have not historically been acknowledged, and for us to be front runners of wanting to be that voice of inclusion, that voice of diversity, that voice of equity, I applaud that. And I don't want to see us stop. I want to make sure that we are front runners and sending that message, as the rap says, everyone is welcome to our flock. And so I think the creativity, but more importantly, I think the priority of showing that we are leaders in this movement to include everyone in the city. So I just want to thank you for that. Thank you, Commissioner.
All right. Thank you. And thanks to you and everyone else for their work on this. I think they're both beautiful. And while I understand and agree with Commissioner Peters about branding and how that consistency of a look is extremely important, you know, folks here in our area are used to seeing the regular buses, and so what I find in the feedback that I hear from a few people when we have a wrap that's themed is extremely positive, and it's like it really stands out. And my hope is that will really help to show everyone that PSTA really is part of the community, that it is fresh and exciting and involved in all of our different activities all of the time, especially things like Juneteenth and Pride. These are extremely important to many, many people in our region. And so being in step with that, I think, in a bright and cheerful and positive way is really just a great way to show that unity with the community. So thank you for that work.
Thank you so much.
All right, did we have any other questions or comments? Looks like no, so thank you very much. We appreciate you joining us this morning. We'll move next to public comment on consent agenda items or items not on the agenda. For those who would like to speak about any of the action items, we'll give you the opportunity when that item is discussed. If you could please fill out a green card and hand it to Rachel or Clarissa. Are there any members of the public here today who wish to make a comment?
There are no public comments.
All right, thank you. We will close our public comment segment and move on to the consent agenda. Are there any items to be pulled from the consent agenda? Commissioner Seal.
Yes, I wanted to pull 4B, which was the specialized consultant services, please.
Okay. So, item 4B. Okay, any other items? Seeing that there are none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the change?
Move approval of the consent agenda with the exception of item 4B.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Seeing that there are no further requests for discussion, if we could please open the voting system. Commissioners, please enter your votes.
Mine's not coming up, and I vote yes.
Okay, that's everybody. No, we're missing one person.
Gal's thing isn't coming up.
Well, Pat,
Oh,
that all?
no, that's it.
Are we-
We're good.
okay. All right, seeing that all commissioners have voted, it appears that the motion passes to approve the consent agenda item with the exception of item 4B. Where did we put 4B on the agenda then?
Well, you'll just hear it now. So that
Okay.
item's been pulled, and I think you've got Al here virtually.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So we'll move then to item 4B.
Okay, you want to?
Oh, does that?
Okay. So I guess I'm not on the finance committee, so I realized that it went through different committees before it came to the board. But essentially, this is almost double what we're spending for audit services, it appears. It said that last year brought the total value of the CLA contract to 510, and then this is essentially
Oh,
900,000.
You know,
And
I
don't
can't
really
explain that.
understand, it's like you're also authorizing several firms to be working on this, so I looked through the presentation and I tried to understand what.
That's a good question, and we talked about that at the Finance Committee. That reference to what we did in the past was not how we're proposing to do it in the future. What we did in the past, we had an auditor on board to do the annual audit for PSTA, and then for some special tasks related to financial review of things, our phone, our communication systems and stuff like that, we kept giving extra work to the auditor. And that's what that's referencing to, is that the contract to do the audit was inflated to do these other things. And the Finance Committee back in 2019 suggested to Mr. Burns and PSDA, could we maybe just do a separate procurement for these small task orders for financial consulting, technology consulting, and continuous improvement, which is basically other kinds of outreach kinds of things, so that we wouldn't do that. We could get a specialized consultant that could probably do a better job, and then for these small task orders, as a different way. So they did a procurement. This is not for auditing services. This is for other types of work.
So this is in addition to the auditor then?
This would be in addition over the next 5 years. Any audits that come up, like right now, we have a triennial review going on with the federal government. We might need some additional services to help with a safety thing or whatever that comes out of that audit. That's what this would be for.
So any one of these firms that are listed could be used as needed?
Yeah, yes. Subject to available budget, of course.
Okay. Was the CLA not performing adequately with the additional?
They were performing just fine. It was just that they were procured just to do an audit, just to do the audit. They're actually one of the recommended firms to do some of these other work. They're a large firm. But it was just a sense that we were kind of expanding the scope of the audit beyond what it was really meant for. And to do a separate specialized procurement would be better. I don't know, Al, if you have anything else to add on that. You're muted. Oh, well. Okay.
If you don't mind, I know Al was having some technical difficulties the other day with his whatever. Are you good? Okay. One of the things, Commissioner Seal, is when we hired CLA on, we allowed for additional services. But this opens up the competition, and I'll give an example. Reviewing the, one of the items that CLA did was reviewing our telecommunications bills, looking at all of our lines, looking at everything to see if we could save money, which we did. We saved around $30,000 to $40,000 a year with the work that they did. But they're not the only firm who can do that kind of work. So the Finance Committee, once we hit our limit with what we had the board approve for CLA, said, let's take a look and open the competition for these other different kinds of consulting lines. So that's essentially what we did, which gives more competition, gives us better pricing, allows for greater depth of opening it up to other entities to do. So CLA did a great job with our audit, and we went out for audit services and ended up picking Cherry Beckert this time. And I do like to change up auditors periodically to keep us on our toes.
So this is 900,000 over 5 years?
Over 5 years, not to exceed, and there's 3 different categories, as Brad had mentioned. We have a financial category, information technology, and continuous improvement. And look at that.
Wow, it's like magic.
Sorry.
So over the 5 years, we will be able to utilize these firms, not each firm up to that amount, but as a total for each category. We'll be keeping track of how we're doing it.
You're doing perfect.
Okay.
And the only other thing that I thought was interesting was I looked at the rankings and the scores, and in some cases, it looked like that you followed exactly the high rankings, that you kind of picked different firms, and I guess there was a rationale behind that?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, Good morning, Madam Chair, Al Burns. I'm your procurement director. Sorry, I just ran downstairs. You're absolutely right. There was an evaluation criteria that was followed. There were over 10 firms that submitted, but only 8 received contracts. So there was a vetting process. Some proposals floated straight to the top and others. Thanks to Commissioner Shulman, we'll be adding in the packets in the future the evaluation criteria that was evaluated against, and give you a more detailed summary of the whole evaluation process so you can kind of see behind the curtain how everything was evaluated and how we came up to the award recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
For the explanation.
All right. Commissioner Flowers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think one part that confused me was just the overall term of audit, because when you say audit, we think of audit for the overall organization.
Yes,
So that may have been one of the things that confused the overall audit versus these condensed audits, because they're condensed specific to items. Just another suggestion, I know when I first got on this board, there was a lot of conversation about one particular topic, and it surrounded the fact that some of us don't serve on certain committees, so we may not know all of the detail of the conversation that was in that committee meeting. And so maybe for that information, to make sure it gets to the board members prior to, especially when it's something like this. And in that way, it kind of helps to clear up. So I know that was something that was requested. I don't know if we ever, made any action towards, it wasn't requested of you. It was a general conversation, but that kind of helps because if you don't serve on the finance committee, you don't know the detail to the conversation to be able to help you understand this. So I just want to make that suggestion again, if we could get that information out. And in that way, it may help commissioners who don't serve on those committees understand your rationale for some of the suggestions and requests.
I'll do my best to get it out in front of you well in advance of the board
Yeah,
meetings.
just may help. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
Move approval of item 4B, specialized consulting services.
Second?
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve item 4B. Seeing that there are no further requests for discussion, could we please open the voting system? Commissioners, please enter your votes.
Mine is still not coming up.
Yeah, 12.
Yes.
Oh, you're just on a delay.
There it is.
All right. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, next up, we have committee updates, and we'll start with an update from Mark O'Hara, Chair of our Track Riders Committee, followed by Ross Silvers for Forward Pinellas's Local Coordinating Board Report, and then I'll update us on Forward Pinellas. And last but not least, Commissioner Flowers for Tbarda. Good morning, Mark.
All right, good morning. Well, that's not Chair Gerard. Good morning, Vice Chair Driscoll and board members. The track committee met virtually on May 17th, 2022. We were pleased to hear a detailed update from Abhishek Dayal, Director of Project Management, on the ongoing construction of the Sunrunner Bus Rapid Transit Project connecting downtown St. Petersburg to South Pasadena and St. Pete Beach. He informed us that 30 station platforms have been completed, with red asphalt paving currently in progress for the bus and turn lanes to be finished by next month. State-of-the-art shelters, art panels, and totem poles will adorn each station along the 10.3-mile one-way route. Sunrunner will make 16 stops within a 35-minute travel time, assisted by transit signal priority along the route. Track members are very excited to ride Tampa Bay's first BRT line in Pinellas County, planned to open in the fall of this year. Debbie Leas, Chief Financial Officer, reviewed the proposed program of projects that PSTA will apply federal formula funds to capital grant applications for in fiscal year 2022. The board will be hearing this presentation today on this exciting program of projects. Our next track meeting will be held in person on Tuesday, June 14th, on the second floor of the PSTA headquarters in the auditorium at 4 p.m., and all are welcome to attend. Thank you so much, and I can take questions if necessary.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, we have no questions, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark.
Our next report, rather than Ross Silvers, we actually have Commissioner Patty Reed providing the Forward Pinellas Local Coordinating Board report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The local coordinating board met on May 17th in downtown Clearwater. During this meeting, we discussed Heather Stobush, PSTA's planning director, reviewed the new rate model submitted to the Florida Commission for Transportation Disadvantaged. She explained how the per-trip rates PSTA and its partners can be reimbursed and have increased from the last year. After approving the new rate model, Forward Pinellas Robert Fiegel advised the LCB that he would attend that doesn't make sense. The CTD Commissioners Business Meeting in Stuart, Florida, to support PSTA's designation as Community Transportation Coordinator for the next 5 years. The meeting was yesterday and PSTA was approved. PSTA's Nicole Then presentation, the PSTA's board's recommendation to expand TD bus pass eligibility from those earning 150% of the federal poverty level to those earning up to 200% of the federal poverty level, which the LCB unanimously approved. The Neighborly Care Network's Mona Allen then gave a presentation about the impact of COVID upon Neighborly's services, expressing gratitude to the Area Agency on Aging and to PSTA for rate increases, which will allow them to continue to provide vital transportation to seniors. PSTA staff then discussed the Innovation and Service Development Grant submitted to the TD Commission for continued funding of TD late shift and bringing cross-country TD trips to Pinellas, Pasco, and Hillsborough counties. After the meeting, Ford Pinellas identified a technical issue related to the Commission for Transportation Disadvantage approval of these items, so a special meeting of the LCB will take place on June 21st at 9:15 a.m. to properly reconfirm these actions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is the forward, oh, did we have any questions? No? All right, seeing that there are no questions, we'll move on to the Forward Pinellas update. The Forward Pinellas Board last met on May 11th, 2022. Here are some of the highlights. The board unanimously approved the FY 23 to 24 Unified Planning Work Program. The board also unanimously accepted the Sunrunner Rising Development Study. There were 3 amendments proposed for the countywide plan map, all 3 regarding properties in the city of Largo, and those were all approved. Alex Burns, a USF intern, presented on the Pinellas Trail Speed Study, which is a project that he worked on during his time with Forward Pinellas, and that was regarding a variety of issues regarding speeds and the use of the trail by bicyclists and pedestrians on the trail. And a great discussion was had about how we could address some of the challenges and some of the perceived challenges that exist among trail users. We received a presentation on the draft transportation priorities for Forward Pinellas. And regarding the spotlight updates, Mr. Blanton wrote a letter to the Florida Division of State Parks to request funding for design and construction for Honeymoon Island State Park roundabout at the park's entrance. And mentioned that in the next Gateway Partnership meeting, they'll discuss further implementation steps and possible projects that could be funded under the FDOT Commute Options Funding Program. And those are the highlights from the May 11th, 2022 Forward Pinellas Board meeting. And do we have any questions regarding that report? Seeing that there are none, thank you very much. And we will go to our Tbarda update with Commissioner Flowers.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and again, I apologize for being late. Tbarda, as you know, has a lot of things going on. We have a meeting this Friday, so we have a lot of items we'll be voting on. But some of the key action items were that we certainly looked at adding individuals to our committee. And so we unanimously affirmed Carlene, and I'm gonna say her name wrong, Reese's, and Bob Esposito to the CAC. We have our new office space, our new office facility as of July 1. I think I gave the address the last time that I was here. So anyway, we have a permanent home now, so we're grateful for that. We are going through making formal introductions and presentations regarding the interlocal agreement for financial obligations. If you all recall at the last meeting, I shared the formula that we wanted to use in order to seek financial support from the various municipalities and counties that are all a part of Tbarda. And so David has begun that process. I've heard from a few where they say they don't need a presentation. They're in for the dollar amount that's been requested. I have offered and will be attending some of the other presentations with David, just to make sure that those municipalities and counties are very familiar with all of the projects that we are seeking to get moving and certainly continue to have a regionalized support system for transportation. We received our 2022 Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. That has to be done, the presentation has to be done, and it has to be approved and submitted to DOT in order for us to move forward. So we submitted that plan, and we had only one incident, so that was pretty good. The executive director gave his report, and so we've asked that a staff report be provided every month, so that we just kind of know what's going on day to day with the Tbarda agency, especially since we have a funding request still up, and we're hopeful that it will get signed. It has made its way through last year. Some of you recall, it made its way to the governor's desk and then was vetoed. So we're hopeful that that 1.2 million is in fact approved. The unfunded regional transit needs list identifies all of the collective priorities of all of Tampa Bay transit agencies, so that's what we're working from. That list also serves as a reference point of the projects that are most needed, and then we rank those projects in order of urgency. Presentations, the governing board heard a presentation on electric vehicle consideration by Scott Pringle and Karen Winker of WSP, and PSTA was used as an example to follow because we certainly have been the lead on purchasing electric buses and other vehicles for our fleet, and we are thankful. And as you all know, if you are around Janet Long, she's going to always throw in sustainability and resiliency. And so we try to make sure we cover that before she can make that comment. We have, again, we just have our meeting this coming Friday right here at PSTA, and feel free if you want to attend and kind of hear what's going on. We'll be talking about the gondola project. We'll continue to talk about our express lane projects. We'll continue to talk about funding requests that we have in for the federal government, and we'll continue to talk about ways that we can partner in a regionalized perspective so we're moving residents easily throughout Pinellas, Pasco, Hillsborough, and Polk counties. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions on the Tbarda report? Seeing that there are none, thank you, Commissioner Flowers, and we will go ahead and move on to our action items for today, beginning with PSTA's annual federal program of capital projects. Here to present this item is our very own Chief Financial Officer, Debbie. Good morning.
Thank you so much, and I apologize for not introducing myself earlier when I popped up to our new commissioners, so welcome. We always have very exciting things to talk about here at PSTA. And last Wednesday, we held a public hearing on our program of projects, which is a federal requirement in order to move forward in putting in grant applications. So what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about that, and the action item will be to approve the program of projects so that we can move forward in making grant applications, etc. So there's a lot of work that not only staff does, but the board does as it relates to the program of projects. Oftentimes it takes more than 1 year, takes a couple years of working with our legislators to get funding for projects. So these dreams sometimes take a little while to move forward. We get two pots of funds from the federal government. One is a guarantee, but we don't always know what that dollar amount is, and that's formula funding. And that is the first set we have on here at about $20.4 million. So we're very appreciative of the bipartisan infrastructure law that has allowed for this dollar amount to grow by about 25% or $4 million up to this $20 million you see on the chart. The second is our planning department does an excellent job of applying for discretionary awards, earmark awards, and we also get a lot of support from the board members as you lobby for that to be able to be successful. And as you can see on here, we were very successful in getting about $18.4 million out of a bus and bus facility discretionary earmark, along with getting some additional monies out of some other areas, for a total of $40 million that we will be able to use towards making, as I call it, dreams a reality. I'm going to start with the smallest one first. This is a formula fund that we get. It's not a dream, as I think I told the Finance Committee. It's not even a nap. It's a little snooze where you wake up and say, oh my gosh, I need a little piece of equipment. I need a new radio, something in there. So we use about this $9,000 we get every year towards those small purchases. But now we look at what one of our big items are. As Commissioner Flowers just mentioned, sustainability is part of our triple bottom line. And as you know, in December, we came to the board, and we have a award with Gillig, a procurement with Gillig for zero-emission buses. We've already put in one order, and with what we're getting in our formula funds, plus this new discretionary grant, we will be able to do even more and buy more buses. And I'll be spreading those out over receiving them so that we're getting about 12 buses a year for replacement. And then Brad came to me and he said, well, that's nice, Debbie. That's a great thing, but what about all the sedans that we have? All the non-revenue vehicles? What can we do with those to make them zero emission? So I took a look and reached out to a vendor and said, let's do a cost-price analysis between buy versus lease. And it looks like we'll be able to save significant dollars with leasing them. And so we're going to go down that road and explore it even further. So I set aside some money in this program of projects to do just that. Now, in support of all these zero-emission vehicles, we are setting aside money for solar panels, for electric charging areas. I've already got about $2.5 million set aside for this. This is just adding to the pot of funds so that we can be ready for all of these zero-emission vehicles coming forth. In addition, we were successful in getting an earmark of $1.2 million, and this is for en route chargers. Those will help us charge the vehicles in a faster way than a depot charger, and we may be able to put them even on our own property here. There we go. In addition, we don't want to forget about the buses we already have. When we order a new bus, it's coming fully loaded with all the technology, but we need to stay on top of the technology we have on our existing buses. So we're looking to retrofit the equipment on there that allows for the buses to talk to things like Transit app, Wi-Fi, Flamingo, etc. So we've set aside money for that. In addition, we are going to be looking to upgrade our core system with something called HASTUS that's used by our transportation group for everything from scheduling to payroll that comes over into our enterprise system. In addition, we always want to think about our community as well, and the wellness of our community, health and wellness of our community. So we always put aside money for shelters. In addition, we get grant funding from the federal government that gets passed through from Federal Transit Administration to FDOT to PSTA. So it comes with a few frequent flyer miles on it by the time it gets here. And we use that to help support our personnel in our mobility department. We also, as I look forward with the next big project, which is our Clearwater Transit Center, I'm setting aside money for the construction. This is just one piece. Again, it oftentimes takes many years cobbling together funding that will go towards this project. So this may help to complete that as we move forward. This is a small bit, but important. I've got a couple grants people now, and this money goes towards their administration of all these wonderful projects and grants. Last but not least, it's like a big circle. We set aside money for our planning, for future projects, whether it's a capital projects, whether it's our routes. This allows us to start moving forward with the next phase, and it completes a circle or maybe starts the next one. So today, the action item before you is to approve the program of projects so that we may do these applications that have to be submitted by the end of May. And with that, we'll be able to get the approval from Federal Transit Administration to have the funds available for the beginning of our fiscal year on October 1st. With that, I'll entertain any questions.
All right. Any questions for Debbie?
And this was approved unanimously by our planning committee.
All right, thank you. Do we have any members of the public who would like to speak on this item?
No public comments.
All right, thank you. And so, seeing that there are no further requests for discussion, I'll entertain a motion to accept the program of projects.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve item 6A. Could we please open the voting system? Commissioners, please enter your votes.
Meeting,
Who's missing?
click that, and then click on that.
Cal.
Oh, yeah.
Who's on it?
Bueller?
All right. Thank you, and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
There
We'll
we go.
move
You have to
next
stop
to
sharing. Cool one. And you can do
item
the new one.
6B, our Sunrunner Rising Development
Go down.
Study, and Cassandra Borchers will introduce Eric
There you go.
Passman from Kimley Horn to present the study that we're asked to accept, joining Forward Pinellas, St. Petersburg, and South Pasadena. Good morning, Cassandra.
Good morning. Good morning, board members. Thank you very much for having us here today. We are very excited to have this presentation to you today. We've been working very hard on the transit-oriented development program for the Sunrunner Rising project. Now, this project was funded through the Federal Transit Administration Transit-Oriented Development Pilot Program because the FTA recognizes the importance of the land use and transportation connection and the impact that infrastructure projects have on development. As part of that, we have been working with the City of St. Petersburg, so I know many of you have already seen this presentation before. Also, we've worked with Forward Pinellas and the City of South Pasadena. All three of those entities have either accepted or tentatively accepted the study. And as the land use agencies in this project, that is probably the most important part of this, because at the end of the day, this project is primarily theirs. It is theirs for us to help them and work together in partnership. And we have done that, and we've had a really good time doing it. I think that the recommendations in this project will then be translated into land development regulations at that city level, but also have countywide potential implications for future BRT projects. I'm going to turn it over to Eric to give you the recommendations in whole, and then I'll come back and make some highlights. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, Eric.
Thank you, Cassandra, and good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you again today. As Cassandra said, this has been a really exciting endeavor to think about the future of this corridor and these communities and how to capitalize on the investment that you all are making in transit to increase access and opportunity for many, many citizens that live on this corridor today and will live in this corridor in the future. As Vice Chair Driscoll enumerated at the beginning of the item, this has been through both of the cities as well as the Forward Pinellas Board at this point. It's been about a 2-year experience at this point of going through a fairly traditional planning process, but a fairly non-traditional engagement process. If you're doing the math in your head, 2 years ago was spring of 2020 when the world began to change on us. So midstream, we completely changed the engagement effort associated with this plan and went from in-person open houses and public meetings to a lot of stakeholder groups and virtual workshops, both corridor-wide as well as station area specific. And in the end, I think the quality of engagement and feedback that we got through this process was really tremendous. And the understanding that these communities have that focusing development around our transit stations is an excellent strategy for how we give people greater accessibility to education, to employment, to entertainment, and to opportunity, which frankly made our job really easy when we started to think about, okay, then what are the possibilities for future development along this corridor? But we also recognize that this is a very long corridor with a variety of settings from downtown St. Petersburg to the western portion of St. Petersburg, which is much more residential, and into the city of South Pasadena. So the way that we framed up all of those opportunities is one plan, but actually 3 documents. So the plan is laid out in 3 volumes. The first volume specifically looks at downtown St. Pete and the Grand Central and Union Central area, because that's our urban core within the city and where we're seeing the greatest development pressure. The second volume looks at our village and neighborhood areas in the western portion of the corridor within the city of St. Petersburg. And then the third document focuses specifically on the city of South Pasadena. What that did is it enabled us to really tailor the recommendations for this study to each municipality and each station area in a way that we really feel like it's going to have a much greater possibility and directness in terms of its implementation. As I mentioned, we separated this out into segments of the corridor, and to really address that, we created 4 different place types or station types. The most dense being our downtown and our urban that you see on the right side of the screen, to our less dense village and neighborhood stations as you move out into those areas of our community that are less dense and less concentrated. And then as we went into the recommendations, we also looked at the market potential. What's actually happening in terms of development in each of these areas today? What is the current development activity? What is the potential for future development activity? And how can we, again, tailor the recommendations so that we're ready in those areas that are experiencing pressure today, and have some time to think through and develop our recommendations in the areas that probably are a couple of years off in terms of the development community catching up to where you are in terms of the investment. So with that as our framework, we laid out the recommendations in 3 different sections. A section that talks about policy and regulatory. How do we really enhance and update our zoning regulations and our development regulations so that what you see in the decades to come is transit supportive, walkable development. We laid out a section that talks about infrastructure. How do we make these station areas more walkable and more accessible to a larger part of the community? And then we have a series of recommendations that relate to partnerships. Now, as Cassandra mentioned, ultimately the implementation of these policy and zoning recommendations lie with the municipalities. They have the land use authority and that regulatory power. But we did lay out for each of the station areas recommended building heights and densities and floor area ratios as a starting point. What's important is that each of the municipalities, as they start to update their codes, again, take these as a baseline, but then tailor them to their own local plans, community desires, and needs. And what's likely to happen is you might start the threshold a little bit lower in order to keep the development closely concentrated to the stations. And as these communities evolve and development occurs over years and decades to come, then you might move those bars up a little bit. Again, trying to make sure that the development in and around the station areas is creating that walkable, equitable community. Just as an example, when you look at the village place type, it actually lays out, here are some of the basic recommendations, and then here are some extras. Maybe one of the strategies isn't to move all the way from A to Z in our regulatory framework on day one, but move the bar so that our baseline is correct and then provide incentives and bonuses for those that are able to do things that are important to the community, like maintaining housing affordability or providing affordable units, workforce housing, creating public spaces and open spaces, which are going to be vital in these more concentrated areas. So ultimately, what the zoning framework attempts to do is to sort of increase the baseline, create additional flexibility, and then provide incentives and bonuses for truly transit-oriented development that is more focused, concentrated, mixed use, and walkable. Now, when we just run the numbers on all of this, all of the stations across the system, look at where we started, a quarter-mile walking distance within each of the stations, and everyone took all these recommendations to heart. This is the development potential of the corridor in these boxes below. Anywhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 to 20,000 new residential units that could be accommodated within this corridor, and between 3 to 5 million square feet of retail, restaurant, and office space over the next 20 years. So your ability to grow as a county and as a community is significantly enhanced by supporting transit-oriented development in a corridor that provides your public transit backbone in order for people to get where they need to get without having to have a vehicle. And when we talk about where this is likely to happen, you've heard me say concentrated a couple of times. We do feel strongly about that. We want to be careful that the uplift that happens from this doesn't happen 4 blocks or 5 blocks away, where it doesn't really reinforce the transit system. So we've created these study areas that started with a 1/4-mile walking distance, which makes a lot of sense as you get to the western part of the corridor into the village and neighborhood in South Pasadena areas, which are far less walkable today. But in your downtown area and in our Grand Central area, where we already have pretty clustered development and the area is more walkable, we've worked with the city of St. Petersburg to expand that area to a 1/2-mile walking distance in the plan. So in those downtown and urban stations, we're looking at a 1/2 mile. And again, when the cities go into the zoning code, they're actually going to create the maps that talk about which blocks and which properties. That as a starting point, larger areas within our downtown and urban, and then more restricted areas within our village and residential areas, not only to keep the development concentrated, but also to limit intrusion into stable single-family neighborhoods throughout the corridor. And then we cannot put enough emphasis on the street presence in these areas where the stations occur. Future development needs to have the buildings right up to the back of the sidewalk. We need wider sidewalks and bicycle facilities that support the opportunity for folks from the surrounding area to get to these transit stations without getting into their vehicle as a starting point. Once they're in their vehicle, we have to convince them to change their mode of travel, right? But if we can make each of these station areas more walkable, more accessible, a better walk, a safer walk, a stimulating walk because they're next to offices and retail and clustered housing, we stand a much better chance of getting the uplift that you thought you would get when we instituted high-capacity transit. And so that leads into our infrastructure recommendations. Sidewalks, wayfinding, bicycle routes, making sure that all of our sidewalks are safe, that they're accessible, and that we have the supporting urban street furniture to support it, and look at opportunities to limit parking, particularly parking between buildings and streets, but even parking in the district as a whole. Many of our Sunbelt cities now are catching on that we can get rid of parking minimums in transit-oriented development areas because the retail and restaurant market will drive what they need without us having local codes that overdo the amount of parking that we have so that we have big vacant asphalt parking lots. And also looking for opportunities to integrate public open space, landscaping, trees, greenery, as well as public art, which creates that sense of attraction and comfort within each of these areas. So we get into partnerships, there's 3 last things I want to hit. One is there is a lot of information and a number of recommendations in this program related to housing affordability and equity measures. How do we make sure that the investments that are going to be made in this corridor are not for one particular demographic within our county and don't displace the communities that are already there? The communities that are already in these areas should share in the prosperity that these investments will create. So what can we do in terms of maintaining housing affordability and increasing our supply of affordable and workforce housing? So there are a number of strategies and recommendations in the plan, particularly with some community-based benchmarks, not just using our average median income as the county as a whole, which does not represent the average median income of some of the communities through which this transit line runs. How do we create community-based benchmarks and be sure that we are monitoring the development activity, looking out for those that are in danger of displacement, and increasing and maintaining our supply of affordable housing? There's another set of those equity measures that also looks at community asset building and neighborhood services. When it comes to hiring, when it comes to maintaining our workforce, when it comes to maintaining local businesses, minority-owned and disadvantaged businesses in the corridor, what strategies do we have in place to make sure that we are supporting our local business community and our local workers? So those strategies are also laid out in the plan. And then the third section of partnership opportunities relates to value capture. By the very element of putting millions of dollars of investment in this corridor and this type of high-capacity transit, you are naturally going to increase property values in the area. What we are seeing across the country are municipalities and transit agencies that are partnering to capture some of that value that is being created through the creation of a special service district or a revenue generation mechanism. Then the revenue from that uplift goes back into maintaining and operating the transit system and creating additional funding to pay for some of the public services, infrastructure, and incentives that are envisioned in the plan. Now, we can't put this framework into action through this planning effort. There's a lot of work to be done in this area, and it really needs to be a county-wide effort because it's not only looking at the Sunrunner, but potentially your other high-capacity transit corridors in the future. But we really see this as a trend in the industry. The document actually lays out 3 different models, both in the plan itself, but also in the financial appendix, that look at different ways that you can capture real estate value that's being created through your investment and returning those dollars into the system and into the communities that are in these station areas and surrounded by the station areas, again, to create that additional connectivity so that more folks can utilize the assets that are being created. In terms of implementation, as Cassandra covered, this document is being accepted by the local municipalities. Ultimately, it's up to them to put in the regulatory and policy changes. The infrastructure investments will likely be both at the local level, but also in partnership for some of the larger, more expensive efforts. And then again, some of these partnership efforts really need to be taken on at the county level as well to make sure that we're providing that equity and that funding. So as this plan is being accepted specifically for the city of St. Petersburg, it's being incorporated into Plan 2050. The city's also already asked staff to look at zoning changes in the 22nd and 34th Street areas to get this effort going. And this study will also inform a number of other studies that are going on in the area today, including the Target Employment and Industrial Land Study, what's going on with redevelopment opportunities at the Trop, as well as some additional funding that's being pursued by PSTA to put some additional focus on the 22nd Street corridor as well. So as Cassandra mentioned, our ask to you today is to consider acceptance of this study so that we continue to work with the local municipalities and Forward Pinellas to put these recommendations into action. Cassandra?
Thanks, Eric. It's been a real pleasure to work with Eric. He's been really great on this project, very open and listening to all of our partners, and so I appreciate him very much. I would also like to mention and reiterate what he said at the very end about how the study will have additional work that needs to be done. This is really a guidance document and not a policy document, because all of those policies need to be adopted in other plans. And so this is the reason that we're asking for acceptance and not adoption. There is additional work to be done. You could consider all of this a almost shopping list of future studies. Some of those are funded, and those are the ones that are on the screen that he mentioned. We are still waiting for the Federal Transit Administration to see if we can expand the 22nd Street corridor study into a larger entire CRA study. And once we know that, we'll know how big that study will be. The other study that I think will be most important to this board is the discussion of value capture. That does need to take place at the county level, and most specifically at Forward Pinellas. And so our Forward Pinellas representatives will need to make sure that if this board is interested in that direction, that we ask that board to continue that work and engage us in their discussions. So with that, we'll take any questions that you might have from either Eric or myself.
Thank you. Commissioner Figgs Sanders.
Thank you so much for the presentation, and as always, you know, we are looking to be innovative and we're looking to set the standards, and we're doing that in regards to transportation. And a couple of things that I just want to note in my position as sitting on city council. When we look at, and I appreciate the study and your presentation, but a couple of things that stood out to me in the study, and it still stands out to me, being one of the ones to actually see what and how it's done. Although I appreciate the comment about providing affordable housing, as PSTA, we have no control over that. When I look at how, even as a city council member, how little control, unless it's city investments, that we have over that. So I wouldn't use it as a selling point, but I would make sure that it remains in the conversations as you have done. When we look at community-based benchmarks moving forward with the study, I want us to not still take for granted that the benchmarks do actually include those in those surrounding areas, because we do know of the migration of our neighborhoods and how it has transpired into something completely different and unrecognizable for a lot of the homeowners that are currently there. And again, improving transportation isn't going to change that. So when we look at the studies and when we look at all the assets that we're claiming that it's going to bring, again, my biggest words are always in unintended consequences. Always unintended consequences, and we don't recognize those, or they don't become a priority until it's hard to go back. You know, once you've lost time, you can't get back. But we look at the consequences of those that were involved. When we say things like create real estate value, for who? Definitely can't be the people that are living there or those that are trying to move in there until we see another change in these market rate sales and rental costs that we're experiencing, especially throughout, you know, the communities, it's particularly St. Petersburg. And so I just want to continue to remind us that when we say we're wanting to do everything for the community, with everything that we have and all the moving parts that make up this great city, none of them are mutually exclusive. Transportation, housing, workforce development, economic development, they're not mutually exclusive. So I'm grateful for the study, and each time you do the presentation, I learn something different. But I'm always going to be that voice of the one that's not there, or the one that wasn't included in the original study. So as we move forward with this, you know, because I know the city of St. Petersburg just voted to update an ordinance from, was it 31st to 34th Street, which covers our bus hub. And my only concern with that one is because if there are tables there, and it is about the sidewalk tables and not being on the city right-of-ways. Okay, I understand not wanting it to be a nuisance, but I also don't want to deter from the real reason that the one table that I did see there was a table that was providing information for the homeless, which our bus hub, that has been there forever, actually provided some type of refuge to them. I heard words like aesthetically or, you know, public safety. I get all of that. But again, it's not mutually exclusive. We're in these studies, we're needing to make sure that we are still paying attention to those unintended consequences. And I love PSTA's innovation, how we pay attention to those things in sight, but I just don't want us to lose the things that are not in sight, or not really included by some as a priority. And those are my comments and my statements. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Flowers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. During your presentation, you mentioned looking at sidewalks and things of that nature. You said 22nd and 34th. Did you mean and all other streets in between as well, or just those two corridors?
Yeah, essentially, we've started with that quarter mile, so everything within a quarter mile as a starting point. So each of the station plans lays out opportunities to reinvest and further invest in infrastructure. So it's sort of radial to begin with, but ultimately, yes, every street that connects into the transit station, we need to make sure is walkable and accessible.
Okay, because all of those from 22nd, 25th, 28th, 30th, 31st, and all the little small avenues in between, that is a area that is, quite frankly, pretty much African American. Mostly rental. A few properties have been purchased and homes have been built within those corridors, like in Palmetto Park. Nobody in Palmetto Park can afford the $600,000 homes that are being built there, but they're there. But, and I know I've shared this before, because if you're going up any one of those streets, you hit First Avenue South. And so the Sunrunner is going to be running across, and I know I've already mentioned before about just those connector buses that go north and south, where persons can use those connector buses to get to the Sunrunner, which goes east and west, in order to catch it going, you know, in either direction. So I just wanted to make sure you were including those. Some of these things we've already found out through the state legislature we can't do. rent stabilization right now, we can't do. I wish we could, but, you know, legislation prevents us from doing so. From a county perspective, because I can't, well, I can have conversations with city officials, but from a county perspective, we currently have the escheatment process. So anything that's delinquent in taxes or things of that nature is escheated to the county, just like it is to city municipalities. And just last week before last, we voted to start taking an inventory of all of those properties that have come to us. And then we're putting those back out on the tax rolls by selling those properties. So, so some of the things are moving forward, based on the things that we can do. And some of them, unfortunately, by legislation recently, we're not going to be able to do. I would love if, and you know, I always ask this, if as we move through this process that we're making sure that we're making these pitches and presentations to people in the community so that they understand what's going on. Some people are still calling, asking me, what are those big things being built in the middle of First Avenue North and First Avenue South? And my first instinct to say is, where have you been? But then I do understand not everybody is attached to the different communications that we utilize, and so we may have to go just that extra step to let them know what that is, and that it does support, you know, traffic moving north and south as well as east and west. The first source hiring, I love that concept, but again, difficult sell. That may be something that can be attached to the community benefits agreement that the city of St. Peter's put in place when it comes to employment practices and things of that nature, but we may find ourselves having a little difficulty with that one. And I certainly support leveraging funding for multimodal improvements because, for example, PSTA went applying for a specific grant so that the group that's applying for dollars for the ferry could apply and we would not be competing against each other in that. So I really do support that. I think that's wonderful so that we're all working together. Everybody gets a piece of the pie. And while it may not be our specific project, we are partnering with someone so it still benefits us. The only other thing I want us to be cautious about is I like wider sidewalks because that helps with the mobility. You know, when I'm driving down Fifth Avenue South or 22nd, when it's the art walk, it's a whole lot of traffic, which is wonderful, it's good. But if you widen sidewalks in that particular area, you're going to be taking property away from people because it's so tight right there. So hopefully there'll be a real assessment of where you can in fact widen and where perhaps we need to just not bother it. Because if you go down 28th Street, if you were to widen sidewalks there, you would be literally at the front door of Starling Daycare because it's just so tight right there. You would be at the front, you would be past the front door of Daystar, which is, you know, right across from Wildwood. So just to be careful about that. And when we look at regrid street network, can you explain that a little bit more? Because St. Peter's known for the ease of being able to travel. How do your streets run? North and south, avenues, places, and lanes, east and west, because that's the grid on how it was built. So can you explain a little bit more on that? Because that may make some people nervous when you say regridding.
Sure, yeah, that specific recommendation looks at where we have some areas along the corridor that are super blocks today, most likely because they were very large retail developments, and many of those large retail developments have seen their market shift right out from under them over the last couple of years. Part of that strategy is really looking that as redevelopment occurs, that we're actually reinstituting the street grid that was already there. Basically putting back what was there generations ago, that as properties got assembled and these larger retail developments were created, that we lost those street connections. So it's not creating anything that wasn't already there historically. It's really replacing what we had and lost.
Okay. And thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me the time for those. I had a number of questions, so thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Robinson.
Thank you. Just real quick, the city of South Pasadena, I believe you said, or in the presentation, looks like they're going to see this sometime this month, or have they already seen it?
We workshopped their plan with them last week it was. And so they are putting it on their agenda, I believe, for a June meeting for acceptance.
Okay, perfect. So the commission or council has already seen it and are inclined to accept or approve?
Yes, the work session last week was extremely positive.
Okay, that's all I had right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on this item?
There are no public comments.
Thank you. All right.
I should be on there.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't see Commissioner Oliver.
No
Sorry.
problem. Thanks very much. I'm the newbie on the board, and I'm very impressed with the study. But I'm at the stage now where I don't know what I don't know, and so I ask the Columbo-type questions. Very impressed with what's going on. Certainly see the value of this along the corridor for growth in both residential and commercial. That's clear. I wanted to clarify a little bit what you said about parking and how other parts of the county will access this great resource. And I thought I heard you talk about parking being in commercial properties. And if that's the case, is PSTA looking at modifying its routes to make it more advantageous for folks from other parts of the county that are clearly further than a half mile, quarter mile, half mile, to be able to access this by parking close to that facility? And I realize we're trying to eliminate parking, but for those who live in, say, at the Seminole City Center, how can we access this? Is that part of the plan, or is that a phase two?
So there's two things, and I think this is where sometimes the confusion comes in. There's the infrastructure project, which is the Sunrunner Bus Rapid Transit project, which is the part that PSTA builds. So your question about, is PSTA participating in any parking development? No, we are not. It is not part of the Sunrunner project. We are taking a look at our routes that connect into the Sunrunner and how we might modify those with the Sunrunner opening. We have also a project that we will be bringing to the board over the next couple of years called the Community Bus Plan, and that is the name of our transit development plan, which looks at what is the vision for future transit and transit operations. In that plan, we talk about what are our priorities for increasing service and what that increased service would cost. At this point, we have some plans to change some of the routes. The Route 18 and the Central Avenue Trolley will be adjusted with the opening of the Sunrunner, but no other routes would be touched. They would come into the Sunrunner corridor and connect into the stations, and people would be allowed to transfer. So that was on the infrastructure side. Eric's comment about parking is related to other development, in that when there are parking maximums instead of parking minimums, you encourage alternative transportation use, and that could be part of the land development regulations at the discretion of the city.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? And seeing that we have no requests for members of the public to speak, I'll entertain a motion for approval of item 6B. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve item 6B. Could we please open the voting system at this time? Commissioners, please enter your votes.
Yes.
All right. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And thank you, Cassandra and Eric. It's always a pleasure. Perhaps by the time you present this again, I could fill in if you need to. I've seen it enough times, and it's fantastic. Thank you. We'll go on to reports and correspondence and future meeting subjects. That means it's time for Brad Miller. Brad, do you want to update us on the reports in our packet and upcoming meeting subjects?
I do. I'm excited. I'm motivated as Mayor Dan. Isn't that what we can call you now? Al likes to say. So in your packet is the normal performance reports that we have. In the packet, we have a report that you get every month that I just think is sort of very topical. called, what's it called? It's called Performance Updates. And this provides a whole bunch of information to the board every month. And on the front page is all of the purchases that I have, this is a PSTA board policy, purchases between $25,000 and $100,000 that are under my authority that I have approved in the last month. And you can see the entire list is Mansfield Oil. That's our diesel fuel. Those used to be less than $25,000, but now they're all growing to be more. Unfortunately, we're very thankful that we're moving toward electric vehicles, but we're not there yet, and we do buy a lot of diesel fuel, and it is pinching our budget in a lot of different ways. That's probably the major future meeting subject coming up next month, just like in all of your cities that you serve on, and the county. We will be presenting the draft budget. Debbie Elias and her team will be presenting the draft 2023 budget to the PSTA board next month, and working on that. We have had very strong ridership. The last 2 months of spring break, March and April, have seen records, basically pre-pandemic levels of ridership especially on our tourist-oriented trolley services along the beach, and that's been very successful. Also in your report is a now monthly report that we are providing on PSA Access. As we implement the new software and the new mobility program, that ridership is way up, and we're trying to manage that as best we possibly can as that demand grows back. I want to thank Commissioner Flowers and Commissioner Albritton for trying to come with me to Washington, D.C. A week ago, but unfortunately our trip was postponed due to some changes in who we were going to meet in Washington, D.C. to advocate on behalf of our RAISE grant for the Clearwater Transit Center. And so at times, both Mayor Hibbard and Commissioner Albritton from Clearwater have offered to go, and Commissioner Flowers hopefully will come with me in June. Speaking of people from federal government, they are here in our midst as we speak. PSTA is having the great opportunity, I'm sure the staff is loving it, to have our federal triennial review, which is the audit. They say it's not an audit, but it's basically like an audit of every aspect of PSTA and how we comply with the thousands of various regulations that the federal government places on all of our funding. It's a virtual audit this year, so they are on Zoom somewhere talking to some part of PSTA right now, and it happens every 3 years. So far, I'm hearing positively that we're doing just fine on that. It's also sort of a review of PSTA's management of our subrecipient Tbarda. Tbarda is a grant subrecipient of PSTA, and so that is also part of the purview for that. Encourage PSTA board members to join us at the next month before our next meeting. First up in Dunedin for the Juneteenth event that's in Dunedin, and that's where the artist who designed that bus is going to be. And then at the, let me know if you want to come by the PSTA bus that's in the St. Pete Pride Parade at the end of the month. And that, look forward to seeing you at those.
Thank you. Any other reports for us?
I'm good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any other business to discuss today? Any board member with comments today? Commissioner Fig Sanders.
Today is my day. I do have one comment and clarification for policy. I know I'm on the planning committee.
Yeah.
I have to remember what board this is. I'm on the planning committee, and unfortunately, I was unable to attend last week's meeting because it was changed and scheduled on a Thursday. St. Petersburg City Council meets on Thursdays. So I just need for a point of clarification for the minutes. I was not intentionally absent. It was just scheduled on a Thursday. And council meetings I can't attend planning meetings or committee meetings on council days. So I don't know how we address that moving forward, but I can't meet on Thursdays.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Goal is to keep them on Wednesdays as best we can.
Yeah, likewise, I did share County Commission have our workshops on Thursdays.
Yeah.
So I couldn't attend that as well, and would ask for consideration if possible for other days. Would love to be there.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? No? All right, our next meeting will be June 29th at 9 a.m. Thank you so much, everyone, for a great meeting, and we'll see you then. The meeting is adjourned.
Great job, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much.
Great
Was your
job.
laptop okay?
Y'all make it easy.
Your iPad, I'm
See
sorry.
your eyes had.
Yeah, mine went down yesterday. I heard that. Janet, Kathleen, so they still have mine. They've been texting me, you know, like, what's this?
That's weird. Everything was fine.
My Granicus was gone on my app.
Good one. Yes, yeah, and then.
Uh-huh.